For over a year, the relationship between Ayax and Fernando Costa has been falling apart.
Y eso es un poco pues, lo que me ha hecho cambiar un poco de personalidad. Si antes confiaba más en la gente en general, pues ahora confío menos. Si no les dejas que se acerquen, pues nadie está ahí chupándote la sangre.
When serious allegations surfaced, Fernando still tried to stay out of it.
Entonces, ahora, digamos, a toro pasado y con perspectiva, pues lo que te puedo opinar es lo que tú ya sabes, que opino, sabes, que si es verdad, que la justicia haga lo que tenga que hacer lo antes posible.
But then Ayax said the wrong thing, and in a matter of days, everything turned violent. Diss, tracks in enemy territory, death threats on Instagram, and now the release of the clip of their violent clash. Let's break it all down. There's a clip circulating right now that shows Ayax threatening to put Fernando Costa where he belongs. Not metaphorically, not as a bar in a song. On Instagram, in his own words, telling his former best friend that if he mentions his son again, he'll end up inside a container, and offering him a time and place in the Albay scene to settle it. But here's the thing. That confrontational clip isn't even the most explosive content to drop in the past 2 weeks. Because while everyone was sharing Ayax's threats, Fernando Costa released a music video film ED 15 meters from Ayax's house, walked into his neighborhood like he owned it, and dropped 4 minutes of accusations so devastating that commentators are calling it the most destructive diss track in Spanish rap history. This beef has everything. Brotherhood turned to betrayal, over 80 anonymous accusations of abuse, career destruction, death threats, and the complete implosion of one of Spain's biggest rap duos. Let me break down how two men who used to live together, tour together, and call each other family ended up here. On November 24th, 2025, Fernando Costa uploaded Te avisé, I warned you, and the Spanish internet lost its mind. The track debuted at number 8 on Spotify Spain within hours. The music video racked up millions of views. Hashtags dominated trending topics across X and TikTok simultaneously. And the accusations Fernando laid out weren't about who had better flow or who sold more records. This wasn't your typical rap rivalry, where two artists trade bars about each other's commercial performance or question each other's street credibility. He accused Ayax of paying a woman to withdraw her complaint from a judge, forcing partners into abortion, and even isolating girlfriends from their friends to manipulate them, disguising abuse behind a feminist public image. And the most provocative part? He recorded the entire video in the Albay scene, Ayax's neighborhood, Ayax's turf, the place where Ayax built his reputation as one of Spain's most authentic street rappers. Fernando walked into enemy territory with cameras rolling and essentially said, I'm not afraid of you anymore. Ayax responded not with another track, but with Instagram stories that crossed every line. He threatened physical violence, boasted about having tigres, enforcers, in Morocco, Congo, Mexico, and London. He told Fernando to come to the Albay scene if he wanted to settle it. He published what he claimed were old voice messages from Fernando, begging for money and opportunities, an attempt to portray his former friend as an ungrateful leech who bit the hand that fed him. The clip spread everywhere. Media outlets started calling for calm, reminding audiences that this had escalated far beyond entertainment. And suddenly, a rap beef became something much more dangerous, a public confrontation that had real-world implications for everyone involved. But to understand why this hit so hard, why Fernando's words carried the weight of 100 women screaming into the void, you need to understand what these two meant to each other before everything fell apart. They weren't just collaborators, they were family.
Sí, claro, mira, cuando nosotros vinimos aquí a Madrid, vinimos como hace 5 o 6 años.
Vale.
Somos de Granada, y vinimos aquí hace 5 o 6 años. Y nada, y entonces vinimos aquí yo fui el primero en pillarme una casa y tal, y se metieron todos, y vinimos con los gemelos y Fernando.
That's Blaspheme, the producer who worked with all of them. Describing the early days in a 2022 interview, Ayax, Proc, Fernando Costa, and Blaspheme all crammed into one house in Madrid, grinding together, dreaming together, building something from nothing. They shared meals, shared studio time, shared the struggle of trying to make it in an industry that chews up and spits out hopefuls every single day. Ayax and Proc Pedrosa Hidalgo are identical twins from Granada's historic Albayacin, a UNESCO-listed neighborhood with deep Roma heritage and a reputation for both beauty and marginalization. The Albayacin sits opposite the Alhambra, its narrow cobblestone streets winding up the hillside, home to flamenco caves and generational poverty that tourists rarely see. They grew up broke, working hospitality jobs and supermarket shifts from age 16, while still trying to finish high school. As a minor, Ayax spent a year in the Tierras de Oria Juvenile Detention Center, where he later claimed guards physically abused him, an experience that shaped his anti-authority lyrics for years and gave his music an authenticity that resonated with fans who had experienced similar institutional violence. These brothers started rapping at 12 years old, recording their first track together on makeshift equipment. They grinded through underground battles in Granada parks, uploaded freestyles to YouTube before YouTube knew what it was doing, and built one of the most dedicated cult followings in Spanish hip-hop through sheer persistence and undeniable talent. Then came the breakthrough. In 2018, Ayax's solo album Cara y Cruz went triple platinum, over 120,000 units sold, an extraordinary achievement for independent rap in Spain at that time. When he received his certification at the Promusicae ceremony, he announced he was donating the Economic Award to build an orphanage school in Mozambique. The media worshipped him. Here was a rapper from the streets who hadn't forgotten where he came from, who was using his platform to create real change in the world. And Fernando Costa, he was practically their adopted little brother.
Claro, y nos pillamos una casilla. Claro, y luego ya nos pillamos, vamos viendo lo de la casa y tal. Y pues eso fueron pues 3 meses de locura ahí en la casa. De fiesta, tal, no sé qué, buscando las chanclas que no las encontrábamos ni.
3 months of madness, parties, chaos, brotherhood, the kind of formative experience that bonds people for life, or so everyone thought. Fernando came from similar humble origins. His father was a mechanic, his mother worked in an office, and he spent years working as a supermarket cashier and collecting glasses at nightclubs in Ibiza before music became viable. He understood struggle in his bones. Fernando has said in interviews that the twins were the ones who forced him to rap in public when he was too shy to perform. They took him on tour as their opening act, sometimes without paying him, because they believed in his talent and wanted to give him exposure. They taught him everything about the industry, about performance, about surviving in a business that destroys the unprepared.
Pero creo que sí, que intento ser firme y fiel a lo que pienso y a lo que digo, y sobre todo no intentar defraudar a la gente que me quiere, que eso es ser real al fin y al cabo.
Fernando is talking about loyalty, about not disappointing people who love you, about what it means to be authentic in an industry full of pretenders. Remember those words. They're about to become painfully relevant. In 2017, they released their only official collaboration, a track called Loot. The music video shows all 3 of them looking like an actual crew, moving together, rapping together, radiating the kind of chemistry that can't be faked. Fans are resurfacing that footage now, sharing it next to Te Avise, asking,
"How did we get from there to here? What could possibly have happened to transform this brotherhood into warfare?"
The cracks started forming in October 2024, and once they appeared, they spread rapidly. Journalist Cristina Falaras shared an anonymous testimony describing being drugged and assaulted by a famous Granada rapper. This was during Spain's broader reckoning following the Íñigo Errejón scandal, when women across industries were finding the courage to share their experiences. The floodgates opened. An Instagram account called @Denuncias_Granada began collecting stories, and within weeks the number climbed past 80, then past 90. The accusations were horrifyingly consistent in their patterns. Women, at the time of the alleged incidents, described being invited to after-parties that didn't exist, given drinks that had been tampered with, waking up having been assaulted with little or no memory of what happened. Ex-partners spoke of psychological control, forced physical violence during intimate moments, and threats that kept them silent for years.
Por ejemplo, gente de Ibiza que no me ha hablado en la vida y después de repente me quieren ser mis amigos o las falsas amistades.
Fernando Costa, in that same 2020 interview, was talking about trust, about who your real friends are, about how fame changes the dynamics of every relationship you have, about how difficult it becomes to know who genuinely cares about you versus who wants something from you. The brothers denied everything immediately and forcefully. They posted a joint statement calling the accusations fabricated, announcing lawsuits against their accusers, framing the entire situation as a coordinated attack designed to destroy their careers. No formal complaints existed in the court system, they emphasized. No charges had been filed by prosecutors. But the industry didn't wait for courts to render verdicts. Their management agency, Taste the Floor, severed ties immediately, citing rejection of any act of macho violence. Wising Center Madrid canceled their upcoming concert and issued refunds. Palau Sant Jordi, Barcelona, followed within days. The Indestructibles comeback tour they had announced with such fanfare was decimated venue by venue, each cancellation making headlines and adding to the perception that the brothers were guilty, regardless of what courts might eventually decide. And through all of this public chaos, Fernando Costa was caught in an impossible position. People demanded he speak. He'd been around the brothers for years, he knew things, and fans wanted answers.
Y bueno, ellos saben desde el minuto uno lo que pienso. Entiendo que había mucha gente que me pidiera opinión en ese momento.
Sí, tan reclamado, ¿no? Como...
Sí, había mucha gente que me ha pedido opinión.
But Fernando had his reasons for staying silent, reasons the public didn't know about at the time.
Pero claro, ellos no saben todo lo que hay detrás. En ese momento a mí, pues yo estaba a 20 días de tener a mi hijo.
His son was about to be born. His mother was dealing with serious health issues. His album was in its final stages. The timing couldn't have been worse for him to step into a controversy that would consume everything. He was trying to navigate the most important personal moments of his life, while the entire Spanish rap scene demanded he pick a side in someone else's war.
Entonces, ahora, digamos, a todo lo pasado y con perspectiva, pues lo que te puedo opinar es lo que tú ya sabes, que opino, ¿sabes? Que si es verdad, que la justicia haga lo que tenga que hacer lo antes posible.
He wasn't defending them. He wasn't attacking them. He was trying to survive his own life while the world demanded answers he wasn't ready to give. But even then, the message was clear to anyone paying attention.
I don't like abuse.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement of his former brothers. Until November 2025, when that careful neutrality exploded into all-out war. Before Te Avise dropped, Ayax threw the first punch, though at the time, few people recognized it as the opening salvo in what would become all-out war. In October 2025, he released tracks mocking Fernando as Fernandito Malamanera, Little Fernando WW with bad habits, taking shots at his flow, his credibility, and suggesting he needed ghostwriters to craft his verses. Fans started speculating about the underlying tension. Old interviews got re-examined through new lenses. The energy between them, even in the friendliest archived footage, suddenly seemed different in retrospect, like watching home videos of a marriage that you know ends in divorce. Something had broken between them, and Ayax was poking the wound. Fernando's response was nuclear, not just a diss track, an execution. The track opens with context. Warnings Fernando claims he gave Ayax over the years, establishing himself as someone who tried to intervene before going public. When Ayax fought with his ex-girlfriend and made her cry in front of the dressing room while others watched. When Ayax spat on a sound technician during a flight because he felt disrespected. Fernando says he warned him so many times about his behavior, about how he treated people, that eventually Ayax stopped being his friend. Not because Fernando abandoned him, but because Ayax couldn't tolerate being held accountable.
Ya, yo lo estaba leyendo y digo, se tienen que conocer todos.
Ha sido algo fácil, es algo que digo, dentro de lo que cabe no había ningún problema, todos me han dicho que sí, guay y tal, pero claro, era pues, cuadrar para que vinieran, cuadrar con el beat.
Blaspheme describing collaboration in the old days. How easy it was, how there were no problems, how everyone got along. how the creative process flowed naturally when talented people trusted each other. But there were problems. Fernando just didn't talk about them publicly, not until now, when he decided that silence was no longer an option. The bars in Te Avise aren't metaphorical flexes or exaggerated street tales. They're specific allegations delivered with the precision of witness testimony. Fernando accuses Ayax of paying a woman to withdraw her complaint from a judge. Not in vague terms, but as a direct statement of fact that he presents as first-hand knowledge. He accuses him of losing his house because of substance abuse and exploitation, suggesting that the lifestyle Ayax projected publicly was funded by behavior he kept hidden. He says Ayax's girlfriends warned him repeatedly about his controlling nature, but Ayax treated them like property, isolating them from friends and family to manipulate them at will, cutting off their support systems until they had nowhere to turn. Then came the bar that stopped the Spanish internet in its tracks. Fernando says he started as a fan, that being around an activist rapper seemed like a good plan, but he never imagined the abuse was disguised as feminism. That line hit differently than anything else in the track. Here was a duo that had built their entire brand on social justice, on fighting systemic oppression, on defending the marginalized and calling out hypocrisy in Spanish society. Their lyrics attacked police brutality, capitalism, and institutional corruption. They positioned themselves as voices for the voiceless, and now one of their closest friends was publicly accusing them of being the exact opposite behind closed doors. Predators hiding behind progressive rhetoric. The cognitive dissonance was staggering for fans who had believed in what Ayax I Proc represented. The track also addresses Fernando's son directly, warning that if Ayax talks about his child, he'll end up inside a container. Fernando makes clear that certain lines cannot be crossed, that while he's willing to expose everything he knows about Ayax's behavior, his family is off limits, and any violation of that boundary will have consequences. The line between art and genuine threat dissolved completely, and listeners weren't sure anymore whether they were consuming entertainment or witnessing the prologue to actual violence. Fernando presents himself not just as an accuser, but as a core, orating witness, someone who was inside the circle for years, who saw what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. He claims to have received information directly from ex-partners who trusted him and witnessed behavior himself that he rationalized at the time, but can no longer excuse. The track ends with one line that reframes everything. The one who warns is not a traitor. Fernando is positioning himself not as someone who betrayed a friendship, but as someone who fulfilled his moral obligation to speak truth, even when that truth destroys relationships he once valued. Instead of dropping bars that could match Fernando's devastating specificity, Ayax dropped threats. His Instagram stories accused Fernando of breaking the rules of the beef by lying and touching on family matters. He threatened to throw verses until death. He offered Fernando a time and place in the Albayacin to settle their dispute face to face. He published alleged audio messages where Fernando supposedly complained about money and asked for favors, attempting to reframe the narrative as an ungrateful protege turning on his benefactors out of jealousy and greed. What was unfolding in November 2025 was the opposite of beautiful. It was ugly, personal, and increasingly dangerous. Media outlets started calling for calm, reminding everyone that rap beef, however entertaining, shouldn't escalate into real-world violence. Commentators who had covered hip-hop for decades said they'd never seen anything quite like this combination of serious allegations, public threats, and professional destruction happening simultaneously. Ayax Eventu, Ali released Justicia Poetica as his counter-diss, mocking Fernando's career trajectory and threatening violence through coded and not-so-coded bars. But reaction channels and hip-hop commentators declared Fernando the winner almost unanimously. Ayax's response felt like aggressive posturing without actually addressing the specific accusations Fernando had made. When someone accuses you of paying off victims and forcing a responding with,
"I have enforcers in multiple countries,"
doesn't exactly scream innocence. Here's where this story transcends typical rap drama and becomes something with genuine cultural significance. Prominent feminist voices, including journalist Cristina Falaras and politician Irene Montero, praised Te Avise for finally amplifying the voices of women who had been screaming into the void for over a year. The track dropped around November 25th, International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and whether that timing was intentional or coincidental, the symbolism couldn't have been more powerful. The bitter irony was impossible to ignore and sparked its own debate. Women had shared over 80 testimonies describing patterns of abuse, detailed accounts, consistent patterns, corroborating details, and the industry largely shrugged, treating the accusations as unproven gossip that shouldn't affect business decisions. But when Fernando Costa said essentially the same things in a song, instant national conversation. Ex-partners of Ayax began speaking out publicly on Instagram following the track's release, corroborating elements of Fernando's lyrics with their own experiences. One woman described staying silent because she felt weak at the time, because she didn't want to relive the trauma publicly, and because she never imagined anyone would believe her word against a famous artist. She thanked Fernando for breaking the silence and giving her the courage to add her voice. The Spanish rap scene was forced to pick sides, and the middle ground evaporated almost immediately. Some artists and commentators defended the presumption of innocence, demanding concrete proof before professional condemnation. They argued that anonymous testimonies, however numerous, shouldn't destroy careers without due process. Others countered that the volume of testimonies, over 80, constituted a pattern too damning to ignore. That waiting for court convictions meant waiting forever, since most victims never file formal charges. Ayax had invested everything: years of work, millions of streams, platinum certifications, and an acting career, in building an empire. Now he was watching it burn while the man he'd mentored held the torch. Old videos of Fernando and Ayax together surfaced constantly, performing at Wising Center in 2023, hugging on stage, looking like brothers who would ride together forever. The contrast with the current warfare made both the old footage and the new content hit harder. People couldn't stop watching the before and after, trying to pinpoint the moment everything changed. Let me quantify the scale of this collapse so you understand what's been lost. AXY Proc were at their peak, one of the biggest acts in Spanish urban music. Triple platinum records, sold-out arenas holding tens of thousands, acting careers in major productions. Ayax appeared in Netflix's Hasta el Cielo franchise, Paco Leon's Rainbow, Jorge Coira's Código Emperador. They had endorsement deals, festival headlining slots, the kind of cultural cachet that takes a decade to build. They constructed an empire from nothing. Now, on November 8, 2025, Ayax announced the duo was permanently separating. The Indestructibles tour was effectively dead.
Y hay cosas que a lo mejor encuentras que no están por ahí.
¿Has estado bien? ¿Te ha gustado?
Súper a gusto,
Antes me has dicho que te habían hablado bien de Grimy TV, ¿no?
Everything that used to define their relationship and their creative output shattered beyond any possibility of repair. Ayax framed the separation as the result of fanatical lynching, claiming it achieved in months what 12 years of arguments between the brothers couldn't accomplish. He positioned himself as a victim of cancel culture, of coordinated attacks by people who wanted to tear down successful artists. He insisted that the allegations were fabricated, that the industry had abandoned him without waiting for evidence or verdicts, that he was being punished for crimes he didn't commit. Here's the complicated reality. As of December 2025, no woman from the 2024 testimonies has filed a formal complaint in court, at least not publicly. Most testimonies remain anonymous due to fear of retaliation from the brothers' remaining fan base, shame about what happened to them, and deep distrust in a justice system that historically fails survivors of violence. Ayax sued Cristina Falaras for 750,000 euros in damages for lost contracts and announced legal action against At Denuncias Granada and anyone else he deems to have defamed him. His defense strategy has been purely denial combined with legal threats. No concrete alibis for specific allegations, no counter-evidence beyond categorical statements that Everything is a lie. No alternative explanations for why so many women would independently describe such similar experiences. 5 years ago, Costa was collecting glasses in Ibiza clubs, wondering if music would ever become more than a dream. Now he's released what many are calling the most significant diss track in Spanish rap history, and potentially ended his former mentor's career in the process. The trajectory is almost too dramatic to be real. Yet, here we are. Fernando has said in interviews that he lived many things during his time with the brothers, that silence was no longer an option once he understood the full scope of what had allegedly occurred. Critics accuse him of opportunism. Why stay silent for years while building your career on their coattails? Then speak only when you have a personal beef to settle and commercial gain to pursue. Supporters counter that it takes tremendous courage to break from a circle that powerful, especially when you owe your career to that circle. Sometimes people need time to process what they witnessed. Sometimes they need to see others speak first before they find their own voice. Sometimes the tipping point is personal, a slight that finally makes the cost of silence higher than the cost of speaking. This beef has ripped open something deeply uncomfortable about Spanish urban music and perhaps the music industry globally. The testimonies against Ayax Proc had circulated in Granada's music scene for years, described by insiders as a secret everyone knew. People whispered at industry events. People warned newcomers privately. But nobody with a platform said anything publicly until the accusations became too numerous to ignore. And even then, it took a male peer with commercial clout to make mainstream media pay sustained attention. That's the bitter pill at the center of this entire story. Over 80 women spoke in 2on2. The industry mostly shrugged. One man rapped about it in 2025, and the industry exploded. The disparity says something profound about whose voices get amplified and whose get dismissed, about the thresholds required for different accusers to be taken seriously. Ayax has gone relatively silent on social media since the beef peaked, focusing on legal action rather than public statements. His Instagram now features mostly cryptic messages about justice and truth, without directly addressing the specific allegations Fernando made. Proc has remained largely quiet throughout this entire ordeal, and notably, while the accusations implicate both brothers, Proc has received comparatively less scrutiny and less public anger.
La cara bonita es la gente, los paisajes, todo lo que la gente disfruta, y después la cara oscura es la discoteca, la delincuencia.
Fernando Costa is reflecting on the duality that runs through every layer of this story. Artists who preached social justice while allegedly practicing abuse. A friendship that was supposed to be unbreakable, now destroyed beyond any possibility of reconciliation. A music scene that celebrated authenticity while looking away from uncomfortable truths that threatened business relationships. An industry that believed in women in theory, but required male validation in practice. Fernando Costa continues performing to packed houses across Spain. Te Avise is his biggest hit by far, streams that dwarf anything else in his catalog. Some critics call this proof of opportunism, suggesting he profited from women's trauma. For many listeners, especially women who saw their own experiences reflected in the lyrics, the track represents something more important than chart positions. It represents being heard after years of being ignored.
I need to be absolutely clear about something. No criminal convictions exist against Ayax or Proc as of December 2025. Ayax maintains his complete innocence and continues pursuing legal action against those he says have defamed him.
The justice system has not weighed in definitively. This is the footage going viral. This is the violent beef everyone's discussing across every platform. Whether Fernando Costa is a hero who broke the code of silence to amplify marginalized voices, or an opportunist who weaponized unproven claims to advance his own career at his former friend's expense, that's a question everyone watching has to answer for themselves. But one thing is undeniable: Spanish rap will never be the same after this.